Raise your voices, raise your glass high. Welcome to the Drink O'Clock Podcast. Let's dive. Oh, grab an old fashioned and join the fray. Raise your spirits, let the music play. From the corner pub to the dance hall floor. Drink O'Clock Podcast, we're ready for more.
We are live on a very cold, snowy day in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. My name is Rob Valincius. I am the host of the Drink O'Clock Podcast, and I have the pleasure of having with me Jim Marshall. Now, Jim, I would list all the things that you have, specialties in, but, that's probably a whole other podcast. But, I guess the short story is you discovered an unknown natural phenomenon. You did a ton of which greatly would aid in understanding people, which obviously as a human, we're always, I think, trying to understand each other. And then from that, you created a philosophic system, and you published a book, and it's well received. I saw some of your reviews. I read your couple intros and stuff on your website called Septemics, Hierarchies of Human Phenomena. Welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Rob. Glad to be here.
So I guess my initial question to people that I interview to give us a bit of a background is can you talk to me a little bit about growing up? What led you into that question mark of what is a person outside of what we see, right? It seems like that's a lot of what your beliefs in a lot of the stuff that you have out is kind of like under the shell of people and I guess their what's the word I'm looking for? Their predictability to do certain things and all that. So talk to me about growing up a little bit, and you don't have to go into specifics, but tell me what got you to where you were.
Okay, so first I want to say I have no beliefs of any kind.
Okay.
Beliefs are only necessary when knowledge is absent. Either I have knowledge of something or I don't. So none of this is about beliefs. The acceleration of gravity near the surface of the Earth is 9.8 meters per second. That is a fact. It's not an opinion. It's not a belief. Whether you believe it or not is irrelevant. That is what it is. That is called science. And we engineers walk on a floor of science, and then we use mathematics to make calculations so that we can devise things that actually work, which is what my whole career has been about. So, to answer your question, I have no memory of a time when I was not intensely interested in learning everything taught in every university. Now, of course, that's impossible because we don't live that long. But I did go to school for 28 years and was an honor and scholarship student the whole way. And if I thought I was going to live another 30 or 40 years, I probably would go back to school. And it almost wouldn't matter what the subject is.
Really? That's intriguing.
Because as a polymath, to me, it's all one big blob. I know a couple of dozen subjects at an expert level, and to me, in my mind now, they're all integrated. That's why I was able to discover septemics, because of my polymathic perception of reality, and also because of my unusual career as a human development engineer. So growing up, I can still remember the exact moment at age 10 when I first found out that some children didn't like school. I was shocked. How could that be? That was like a dramatically new concept to me. I loved school. I was excited every day to take my briefcase and go in and learn about trigonometry or Abe Lincoln or geography or whatever it was. And I did very well with all of it because I was intensely interested. So that's sort of who I am as a person. I was one of those irritating little kids who wants to know how everything works. So as like at 3, I wanted to know, how does the refrigerator work? How does the air conditioner work? How does the car work? How does the furnace work? Now at that time, of course, I didn't understand. Now I understand all those things, but
Yeah.
I always want, and I'm still like that. I still want to know, how does it work? And that drove me to spend most of my life creating what now is known as septemics.
So can you just kind of explain to my listeners, because I have seen the word before, but I honestly didn't know really much about it until I was doing research on you. What is at its base? What does polymathic mean?
Okay, a polymath means literally uh, many knowledge. So a polymath is a person who is astute in multiple disparate subjects. There aren't too many.
So
Um,
so
Go ahead.
so so you found that there was not one subject in school that you gravitated towards. It was just you just loved everything.
That's right.
That's what. See, I I'm definitely not polymathic, and like there's subjects I grab, like psychology was. I wanted to be a psychologist, and I probably would have if I had different financial situations when I was younger, because I paid for all my own schooling. So I was like, all right, I'm gonna get my degree, but I can't continue to go. I got to make money. So I probably would have continued that, because for me, I love the psychological aspect of the human being. I love learning
Right.
about why people do what they do. I'm fascinated with sociopaths and psychopaths. I mean, that's obviously I know a lot of people are, but I really like to learn about, well, why do you think? And that I was always good with those. I'll never forget this, but my psychology classes, I guess a lot of psychology classes in college were, you didn't have a lot of, ABCD, right? It was like, all right, this person has this going on and this going on. Diagnose them. What do you think it is? And it was a paragraph answer. And I loved those questions.
Uh-huh.
Because I would always get those right, because I knew the subject really well, especially if I liked
Mhm.
it, you know. And in Western civilization, I was big into to that type of history, and so there were certain topics I gravitate towards, and those were always the classes that I did really really well in, because
Right.
I like you when you love what you're learning, it's easy to remember when you're taking a test, you know.
Right.
Now, do you find that it's easy or hard to know, to be an expert in all of those things? Like, did you find out that it was just easy growing up, and that it was, you didn't understand why it was harder for other people?
Well, let me try to parse your question.
Okay.
Now that I am an expert in these subjects, it's very easy for me. Garnering the knowledge is a lot of work. So, through most of my life, while other people were playing video games, something I've never done, playing golf, something I've never done, uh, going on cruises, something I've never done, et cetera, I was studying or researching or meditating. That's what I was doing most of my life. So, for example, when I was in college, I took the maximum load, which was 18 credits. But then evenings and weekends, I would study other things outside the college with other educational organizations. So now, of course, it's work. Learning is work. And the more detail you want in it, the more depth you want in it, the harder the work is.
Yeah.
So it wasn't easy getting there, but it's very easy being here.
That makes sense. I mean, that makes sense. When you cut out a lot of these, it's the same thing with being an entrepreneur, right? It's like your business can be very successful, but it dictates how much time and effort you put into it.
Right, right,
When you water a plant every day and you stick with it, eventually it grows. Sometimes it's
right,
not a, excuse me, it's not a fast thing either. So I appreciate, people that put the time and the work in,
right.
so let's talk about septemics. Can you break down the basics of what that is and kind of how that came to be?
Sure. Well, septemics is, you realize there's several questions there, and I'll get to all of them.
Yep.
Septemics is a philosophical science based on the fact that many phenomena related to humans occur in a sequence of 7 levels. Literally, the word septemics means of or pertaining to 7. Septemics comprises a collection of scales or sequences, each of which breaks down various human phenomena into a hierarchy of 7 steps. There are 35 such scales, each of which is unique, and together they span the spectrum of human experience. By which I mean any problem, dilemma, difficulty, situation that any person has that has anything to do with people can successfully be analyzed by one or more of these scales, usually more than one.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
Um,
Now, as
can
far as
you?
how I got
Yeah.
to
Go
it,
ahead.
that's a longer story. The story really begins when I was accepted into engineering school at the age of 16. Now, I thought, of course, at the time that I was going to be engineering physical things, as did all the other students, airfoils, motors, electrons, and such. But by the time I had my bachelor's degree, it was clear to me that I wanted to engineer the human psyche because it is the area of greatest mystery, of greatest unknown, and more importantly, it is the area in which we as a race are failing miserably. 95% of the difficulties in industrialized society are because people don't understand people. Don't understand the wife, don't understand the boyfriend, don't understand the next door neighbor, don't understand the boss, don't understand the employee, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. This is vast, it goes in all directions. And Septemics solves that problem across 35 axes. In other words, there's 35 different ways of slicing it. So if you can't get at it with this one, you get at it with this one.
Okay.
Uh, so there are 24 scales, which I call individual scales, that apply primarily to an individual, and 11 scales, which I call group scales, which apply primarily to a group. If I may, I'd like to tell you the names of those scales. It only takes about a minute, and then you'll know exactly what subject matter is in the book.
Yeah. Hit me.
Okay, these are the individual scales: the scale of basic purposes, the scale of personal influence, the scale of choice, the scale of permeation, the scale of thought, the scale of identity, the scale of evaluation, the scale of motivation, the scale of control, the scale of stopping, the scale of scholarship, the scale of literacy, the scale of human ability, the scale of memory, the scale of spiritual identity, the scale of mental deletion, the scale of aberration, the scale of physical fitness, the scale of justification, the scale of belief, the scale of equanimity, the scale of attack, the scale of conflict, and the scale of reaction. And these are the group scales: the scale of relationships, the scale of life spheres, the scale of government, the scale of civilization, the scale of survival, the scale of management, the scale of exchange, the scale of communication, the scale of allegiance, the scale of sexuality, and the scale of politics. Any one of these scales by itself could dramatically improve the life of the person. And let me give you an example of how that could work.
I was going to ask you to
Yeah,
provide an example. I think that would help.
right. So I mentioned the scale of motivation.
Yep.
One of the most important things to know about a person is motivation. That's how the police solve crimes. They look for someone with a motive.
It's true.
Like this guy is killed. They say, well, this guy stands to gain nothing at all from this. So we're not going to investigate him. But wait a minute. There's a $500,000 life insurance policy, and the wife is the beneficiary. He becomes a suspect. Now, she might not have done it, but that's how they proceed.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how they solve crimes. They start with the motive and they go from there. Now, when you're dealing with somebody, one of the most important things to know is, why is this person doing this? Why is he behaving it this way? What is his motivation? So you could take this one scale and you could ask yourself, what is my motivation toward my mother? What is my motivation toward my father? What is my motivation toward my brother? What is my motivation toward my sister? Etc., etc. You could do this on everyone you know and everyone you have ever known. So you could use it this specific way 3, 4, 500 times, depending on how many people you know. Then you could reverse the vector and say, what is my boss's motivation toward me? What is my pastor's motivation toward me? What is my girlfriend's motivation toward me, et cetera, and use it another 2 or 3 or 400 different ways. So you have to realize, and this goes into one of the axioms of the subject, every time you correctly spot any person, be it yourself or another, on any scale, you have a realization. So you say, what is my mother's motivation toward me? So you look at it and say, I see, it's level 4. That explains a lot. And you'll have a realization. You'll say, that's why she said that. See, that's like a little realization. And then you go to your father and you will have a realization. So if you just did this one exercise I just described, every time you did it, you would have a realization. So your mind, just from doing this, would be greatly clarified because you would know your motivation toward everybody you've ever known and their motivation toward you. And that is a big thing to know. So, but you have to realize there has to be, there are 35 different scales. And so which one you choose to use tells you a lot.
Yeah.
Okay, so for example, after you spot your mother's motivation, I'm sorry, my computer's telling me to do some things here, which
It's
I'm
all
not
right.
interested in. Uh, After you find that, that's where she is on the scale of motivation, then you might say, I wonder where she is on the scale of control. So you look it up and you go through the same thing. You spot her on the scale of control. See, because you've been hanging around with her your whole life, you know her. So
Yeah.
once you study the materials, it's not hard to get. It's like if I ask you, what color is the apple you have? You look at it, you say, well, it's red. See, you know it because you have it. If I say to you, what color is an apple? You can't answer that because you don't know which apple I mean.
It's true.
Okay, so see, then you might say, that explains why she's a control freak. She's a level 5 on the scale of control. Hey, I wonder where she is on the scale of attack. And then you look at the scale of, she's at level 5 on the scale of attack. That explains why she does X, Y, and Z. Every time you spot it, you have a realization. That's one of the ways you know you found the right level. If you don't have a realization, it means you didn't find the right level. So that's very helpful to you in getting the right answer.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's kind of how this works. That's like a very
Top down overview.
tiny, very
Yeah.
tiny sliver of what this is about.
Now, how did you? I'd imagine there was a lot of thought process put into this. So, how did you come up with those 35
Right,
scales and
right.
the 7 levels? Was this something that just kind of you just kind of kept adding, and then you're like, you know what? Okay, there's no more scales because I feel like this encompasses the human
I'll tell you,
psyche.
I
Yeah.
actually already started answering that question because when I told you that when I realized I wanted to engineer the human psyche. So I had a long, successful career as a human development engineer, working one on one with hundreds of clients of every description for cumulatively many thousands of hours. All of my clients improved as a result of our interaction. But incidentally, I started to notice I could predict the outcome of the session. I never told this to anyone, but I made notes. And as the decades rolled by, I came to be aware that the client, without his realizing it, would be at a specific level on a specific scale that I had previously observed. And as a result of our interaction, he would go to the next level up. Now, that happened thousands and thousands of times. I don't know how many thousands of times over a 40-year period. Sometimes it would happen 8 or 10 times in the same session.
Wow.
So every time that happened, it verified my hypothesis because the clients knew nothing about this. They didn't know how I was doing what I was doing, what I was thinking, what I was writing down, what I was observing. All they knew was they came to me with something they wanted handled, and I handled it. Guy comes to me and says, Jim, you know, I have this drinking problem. Can you help me with that? I say, sure. So we get in the session and we work on it, and then after a certain period of time, he says, now I see why I drink. It's because of blah, 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 blah. See, now he has a handle on it. That's all they knew. They were getting better.
Yeah.
All this other stuff behind it, all the stuff that I knew and the engineering techniques and everything, they didn't know anything about that. I was there to help the person. And because the person had a problem or a difficulty or an unwanted condition, he was very interested in telling me about it. And I could guide him right into a solution for it and resolve it. So I was just writing down these observations that I had. See, Joe, he's at this level. And we worked together and he went up to that level. And then I would find Fred and he would be at that same level and go up to the same level. So after a while, I realized this was a pattern. I wrote these down. Now, by 1995, I had about 32 scales of varying lengths. They varied between 3 and 7. And again, I had never discussed this with anybody. It's just direct observation. There's no theory of septemics. This is just me seeing what's there and writing it down. So one day, I had a 6-level scale that by then I absolutely knew was correct. And I was pondering a difficult client. And I realized that that client was at a level on that scale that I had not previously observed. In other words, that 6-level scale actually had a 7th level. And when I saw that, I had a big realization. And as soon as I saw what it was, I knew immediately where it fit in this scale. And when I inserted that 7th level into the 6th level scale, that scale then manifested mathematically. Now, let me tell you what I mean by that. I took 26 semesters of math and loved every minute of it. Math is a very real thing to me. It's not vague. It's not an abstract thing that you just do with a pencil and paper. I see it in front of me all the time. And anybody who really understands math, they say math is the handmaiden of science. So those of us in science and engineering, we're covered with math all the time, see?
Yep.
Whether or not we're running formulas or not, it's there. And when you're thinking about how am I going to construct this, see, you're thinking about that ahead of time. How am I going to fix this? It's embedded with math. So I saw this, and what happened was these data jumped out at me. And at that moment, it went from being a scale, which is a line, to a plane, meaning a whole body of data. In other words, it now had depth to it. And there were all of these interlocking, intersecting mathematical factors that just presented themselves. And I looked at this and I said, whoa, I found something here. I don't know what this is, but whatever the hell it is, it has to be natural law.
Yeah.
Because it's got mathematics embedded in it, like, for example, the Fibonacci sequence. So then I thought, I wonder how many of these other scales that I have are actually 7-level scales that had not been developed all the way, because you have to realize I wasn't developing anything. I was just helping my clients and making notes for my own illumination. Yeah. So knowing what I was looking for, I then studied all these other scales. And to make a long story short, they all developed into 7-level scales. And as each one did, it manifested mathematically. So now I have 32 7-level scales all around human phenomena, each of which had mathematics embedded in them. And I said, this looks like a new subject to me, because I went to school for 28 years and I never saw anything like this.
Yeah.
So then I thought, wait a minute. I could go from helping people by the hundreds, which is what I had been doing as a human development engineer, to helping people by the millions if I put this in a book and get it out so people can have it. So I'm going to have to write a book. So the first draft was finished in December of 95. And I sent it out in a transcript form to colleagues of mine, all of whom had graduate degrees in a variety of subjects. And they all responded very positively, very enthusiastically. And that told me that this was exactly what I thought it was, which is a new subject that could really help people. Because it's natural law, it's not counterintuitive. This is easy to get. You look at it and say, yeah, I get this. This makes sense. So a few people have asked me, what book is your book like? And I have to tell them in all candor, being a well-read person, I don't think there's ever been a book like this before, at least on Earth. But each one of these 35 scales is expressed in what you could call a table or a spreadsheet. And each one of those tables is comparable to the periodic table of elements. Now, before Dostoevsky invented the periodic table of elements, there was chemistry, but he revolutionized it, making it easier to learn, easier to teach, easier to understand. Because he took all the elements and put them in the right order, horizontally and vertically. Hydrogen is first, helium comes second, lithium is third, et cetera, et cetera. It goes down horizontally and vertically. It all makes perfect sense. I think he has 79 elements at the time. Now we have well over 100, and it works. We just keep fitting them in there. Now, every science classroom and textbook on Earth has the periodic table in it because it's manifestly true. It's inescapable. And I can absolutely guarantee you, when we get to advanced planets, we're going to find that they have the periodic table of elements because you cannot advance without it. They're going to have the 3 laws of motion that Newton gave us. They'll have it in a different language, but they'll have it. And that will be an entree for us immediately to start translating our language into their language. Because we'll look at the periodic table and we say hydrogen and they say Shirigby Bob.
Yep.
So we have a translation. See? You go through the whole periodic table. And then it will be very easy to get to the idea of atomic number. They'll have something that says atomic number. You see?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. See? And now we can. So this book is natural law. It's based on natural law. Now, if it weren't based on natural law, I wouldn't have released the book. I wouldn't have even written the book. Now, let me tell you something. This book has been out in some form or another for 29 years. So I have been watching people respond to it for 29 years. People get it. They get it. You don't have to have a college degree to understand this because it's natural law. It's like, you remember the first time you saw the Pythagorean theorem? You were maybe 12 or 13, right?
Oh, yeah.
And this, okay, and you're, oh, yeah, I see this. This makes sense. A squared plus b squared equals c squared, and you can express it in other ways. And you've got it for life.
Yeah.
And, it fits in geometry. It fits in algebra. It's very useful to you.
Algebra was my favorite. Like, I wasn't a mathematician, I'll tell you that. But algebra was the one math that clicked for me. And I was very, very good at it. Very good at it. Sucked at geometry. Couldn't do, like, there was certain math I just was not good at. But for some reason, algebra, I just got it. And I was very good at it.
You must have had a good teacher.
I don't know about now. I haven't done algebra in many years.
Oh,
but
you get it right back.
It's one of those. There was a couple of those in high school that I remember, and I did have a couple pretty good teachers throughout the way. And I think teachers are so important. They really are.
Yes.
Because at the end of the day, like if I'm 30, I'll be 39 this year. If I'm still remembering you from 25 years ago, teach me something. You had a vast, you were good at your job. You had a vast amount of you were just better than the rest of my damn teachers because some of them
Right.
were not great at what they did for sure.
Right.
And some of the harder teachers, although I didn't like them because they were harder, sometimes I tended to learn a little bit better from them as well because of the way that they presented the knowledge. It's just some teachers back then just did, maybe they were, working for the school for 20 years and they're just like, oh fuck this, man. Like they're like here with they're just waiting
Yeah.
to get their, and retire at that point. But I had a Spanish teacher. His name was Dr. Watt. And he was like the coolest. He was one of the coolest. He was probably at the time in his like late 60s, early 70s. And the guy just loved Spanish. Just loved it. And he made you like Spanish. He would play like hip hop, well, not hip hop, but like R&B songs, like, but it was in the Spanish version,
Uh-huh.
and it would get us like into it because we would know some and like popular Spanish songs that people knew, but they didn't know what those words meant, and
Mhm.
he would even test us on that stuff, and I still know some of that stuff now because he was a great teacher, man, and hopefully, I wish we had more of that. I don't think you get it as much. Maybe it's different now because I haven't been in school in a little while, but you
Oh, it's
never really
worse
know.
now. So its school system has been deteriorating steadily.
That bad?
Yeah.
I finished my degree online because it got to a point where I wasn't getting more aid, and I just I was working like 50 hours, 60 hours a week when I was 23. So it was difficult for me to work. I was basically working full time, and then on the 2 days off I had, I was going to school for 8 hours each day.
So,
So like, I was getting burnt out. So I finished my degree when I turned 30. I went back, I got my degree in IT because I'm a computer guy, man. For me, uh, there's something about building a computer. I don't like the software side of it. I hate it. I hate all of it. I hate
mhm,
Java. I hate all that stuff. But building a computer, I could do it for hours and not even
mhm,
realize it. It just, where things are supposed to go. It just clicks, and you can always guarantee that if you build it right, it's going to work. It's going to turn on,
right.
and there's something to that for me. I don't know what it is, but I love it. I could do it. If I can, I'm sure I can make it a job, but if I could make it a job, I probably would do that and be so happy
Engineering.
doing it.
But we live in a world built by engineers now. These devices that we're talking through came from engineers. The refrigerator, the air conditioner, the water softener, the engineers created all of that. That is the world we live in now. Now, if you go back 400 years, wasn't true. Most of life was not created by engineers. It was organic. It was trees and dirt and cows and fences made from logs. So
Yeah.
that's so I just took all of this and focused it toward human affairs. Let me tell you how this is beneficial to people
Yeah, hit me.
in a general way without getting into specifics. I wrote this book to help people. I've had a lifetime of helping people. Each of these 35 skills provides the user with an infallible way of determining the salutariness or beneficialness of any group, individual, or activity. If the group, individual, or activity moves persons up the scales, it's beneficial or positive. If it moves them down, it's detrimental or negative. So I'm giving you a yardstick by which to measure human affairs, which is an entirely new thing. More importantly, as I suggested before, just finding out what level you or another person is at on any scale is by itself inherently beneficial and enlightening. Every time you spot it correctly, you have a little epiphany or a realization or an insight. And therefore, this is really powerful because it absolutely undercuts depression and anxiety. And I could go into that more later, how that works. But the specificity of it dispels those things because you understand. So let's say you have a guy who's having big problems with his wife, right? So he
Okay.
gets this book. He analyzes her across all 35 axes. He knows where she is now on every scale. He now understands her better than she understands herself. Whatever depression or anxiety he had about her is gone. Now, he understands this. And again, I could break this down on a granular level as to exactly how that works, but let me get back to the subject. Once you know the actual level of a person on any scale, you can then improve that person by moving them up one level. This is monumentally significant. I have solved the gradient problem that has bedeviled mankind for 6,000 years. And let me tell you what I mean by that. Most people have problems, dilemmas, situations, difficulties, etc., and they can't resolve them.
Yep,
And
been there.
the reason for that, more than 99% of the time, is they don't know the gradient. All good teachers, therapists, coaches, facilitators, etc., know that human development must be done on a gradient. So you talked about algebra, right? So a good algebra teacher, he knows the gradients for teaching algebra. That's his area of expertise. He knows first he has to tell you what a variable is. See, we have this quantity, but we don't know what it is. And so it can vary. So we're going to call it X. That's called a variable. Oh, see, that's lesson number one. Then it
Yep.
goes to two. Then we have an equation. That means we have something on one side and an equal sign and something on the other side, and they both have the same value. See, and we can manipulate those. That's what algebra is about. See, that's gradients. So I've been involved in education from the age of 3 to this very day. And I've learned an awful lot about how to learn and how to teach. It's all about gradients. So I still have students, and I focus absolutely on the student, not on the subject matter, not on me, on the student. What does he understand? What does he not understand? I watch him like a hawk. Has he got this? Okay, you didn't do that right. Let's go back and do it again. Then I look at, okay, the reason you're not doing this right is you're not executing this thing over here. Oh, I see. See, so it's very analytical,
Yeah.
finding the gradient for the student. So that's what I did for my clients for 40 years. I would find the gradient and then move the guy up to the next level. So, for example, I've worked as a physical trainer. If a guy comes to me and says, Jim, I'm 100 pounds overweight, I can't figure out how to take care of this. Will you train me? I say, okay, I'll train you. So I'm not going to just tell this guy, here's a 100-pound barbell, go lift this, or
Yeah.
go out on 5 miles. That's malpractice. First, I would interview the guy, try to size him up, and try to estimate what I thought he might be able to do. Right. So I make a guess. This guy looks like he can curl 15 pounds. So I give him 15 pounds and say, let's see you curl this. Show him what how a curl is, right? So he's curling it now, right? All right. So, and as he's doing it, I'm saying, how are you doing? He says, this is very easy for me. I could do this all day. Okay, fine, stop. Let's try 20 pounds. Give him 20 pounds. He says, all right, now I'm feeling it. Yeah, I can do about 12 or 13 of these. Okay, good, stop. I want you to do 12 on each arm, 3 sets every day. And at the end of the week, we'll talk again. And at the end of the week, I'd say to him, how did you do? Now, if he says to me, oh, I'm sore, this is tough, I'm having a tough, I say, fine, just keep doing it. If he said, I think I could do more than 12 reps, fine. All right, let's try 15. See, I'm finding the gradient for the guy. So
Yeah.
he's moving forward. And I've done this as a coach and as a facilitator, as a human development engineer. You have to find the gradient. So that is what these scales are. They are the gradients for those 35 areas that I explained. So I talked about the periodic table. Each one of these scales is expressed in what you could call a table, and each of those tables is the periodic table for the corresponding subject. So the scale of basic purposes has a periodic table, and it all fits together horizontally and vertically. And it's all natural law. So when you look at it, it makes sense. So that's what this is about. So you find the person's at, let's say, level 5, and you target him for level 4. Now, if he tries to get to level 1 or 2 or 3 from level 5, he will fail because it's too steep a gradient. But if he tries to get to level 4, he will get there because it's the next thing up. So if a
Okay.
guy's on the third floor, I say go to the 4th floor. He can do that. You know why? He's on the 3rd floor.
Yeah.
Now, if I'm going to tell him to go to the 5th floor, he has to go through the 4th floor to get there. See? So
Makes sense.
I'm giving you the gradients. So each one of these scales is a roadmap for success in the corresponding area. And what I found is these areas are major areas for people, like the scale of equanimity. Nothing is more important in a person than equanimity. When people get in trouble, it's because they lack equanimity. You know, a guy says to you, "You're an idiot." You say, "Oh, yeah," you punch him in the nose. You're manifesting a lack of equanimity. See, if you
Yeah.
had more equanimity, you would say, "Okay, why do you say that?" And he goes, "Ah, okay, you're entitled to your opinion." See, you're maintaining your equanimity because you're at a high level on that scale. If you're at a low level, you react. That's how you get in trouble.
So now this is all mathematics, right? So there would not be any sort of subjectiveness to this then.
That's right.
So how would if I'm doing this on my own and I buy your book and I look at the scale of equanimity, how would I grade myself based
Okay.
on what you outlined?
Okay. So, first of all, let me tell you how this works. You would
Okay.
look at it, right? You would look at it and you say, "I'm not sure I know what equanimity is." Well, I give you the definition right there.
Okay.
Oh, okay. I get what it is. Right? Now, when you look at it, it has components to it, different parts that fit together. And those parts are going to make sense to you, just like the Pythagorean theorem or the formula for a circle. You know, once you see pi r squared, ah, there's this value pi, 3.14, blah, 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 to infinity. We don't know what it is. But you can calculate using that to whatever number of decimal places you want. If you want to calculate it to 40 decimal places, you can do that. Not many people do that, but you could do that if you want, because we have those. But it's not hard to grasp, you see. So when you look at it, you know who you are, right? You've been living with yourself for however many decades. So you're going to
It's
look at
true.
it, right? And you're going to read it. And here's what's going to happen within a matter of seconds, you will find a bracket. You will say something, possibly saying it to yourself, like, "Well, I can see that 1 or 2 don't apply to me. That's way beyond me. I don't even get that." See, you got to count to 5, just at first blush.
Okay.
Then you go ahead and read the text. When you read the text, there's granular explication of what this is, how it works, what to look for, how it manifests. So you get to like level 4. This guy is describing me. Yeah, that's how I am. So you go back and, yeah, I'm at level 4. And when you spot that, you'll have a realization. You'll say, that explains why I can do this and this and these other people can't do it. Or that explains why I have trouble with this guy and this guy. You'll have realizations right away from that. And as you go forward, you'll have more and more of them. So then you're getting a little bit smarter. So then you decide, I'm going to look at another scale. Let's say the scale of choice. Now, the wisdom that you garnered from the scale of equanimity comes with you when you go to the scale of choice. You know yourself a little better. So it's going to be easier. and you'll go through that same process. You'll find a bracket, you'll study it, and you'll have a real, I see, I'm at level 3. That explains why, blah, 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 blah. See? So the more you use this, the more insight you have. As you become more insightful, it becomes easier to use it because you bring that insight with you to the subsequent analyses. So this is a virtuous cycle where the more you use it, the easier it is to use. The easier it is to use, the more you use it.
So it's almost like it's basically a mathematical scale of, it's almost like a mathematical personality scale to a certain degree, right? It's almost like, if I know I'm a level 2, you can also say to yourself, well, how do I get myself to a level 3, right? So it gives you almost like a number goal to hit.
So let me answer that because you
Yeah.
asked the question. So the highest level is 1, the lowest level is 7.
Okay.
So if you're at level 3, you're going to want to move yourself up to level 2.
Okay.
Now, here's why it's not hard. As I said, it's the next thing. Because it's the next thing, it's not hard to get there. You look at it and you say, oh, I see what I have to do. Okay, let's get busy. And that is part and parcel of engineering. What is the next thing? Like if somebody gives me an amplifier, says, fix my amplifier. Okay, so I check all the tubes. All the tubes work. Okay, let's check something else. Let's check the power supply. There's a break in the power supply. Pull it out, put in a new power supply, works perfectly. See,
Boom.
I'm going forward stepwise, finding the correct thing. So now, see, the first question I asked wasn't the right one, but you have to start somewhere. So then this amp is now fixed. So it's the next thing. You see, if you got to the power supply, you fixed the power supply, and now it still didn't work. You said, let me check the condensers. See, you start testing. It's got a bad condenser. Pull it out, put it in. Now it's fixed. See, so you're going to the next step. Now, people sort of do this naturally. The problem is they don't have these scales. So, a guy, you say you meet some girl at a party, right? You're at a party and you start chatting. You say, oh, he's an attractive person. We're getting along. So, well, the next step is, well, why don't we get together for coffee? See, that's like the next step. She says,
Yeah.
okay, right? So now you meet for coffee and you chat, and now you're sort of at the level of, well, what do you like to do on your free time? See, it's like the next thing. And people sort
Let's
of
go
do
out to
this.
dinner, and
Oh,
yeah.
that's right. May I take you to dinner? Sure. Okay. One year free. See, it's the next thing. So it's just that when you know these scales, see, I already know from a lifetime of study that these scales are correct, meaning they are accurate, they are precise, and they are specific. There is no vagueness here. Now, I want to assure your listeners this is not like studying math. I went out of my way to make the math as little present as possible. It's inherent in the material itself, but not in the way I present it. So, the way you experience this when you study this is it's not like you're studying math. It's like you're looking at yourself in a mirror. You put on your glasses or you pick up a lens like Sherlock Holmes. He was going around with a lens all the time.
Yeah.
Let me look at this. Yeah. You look at yourself. I see. So you look at this photograph. This girl has blue eyes. I didn't realize that before. See, because you have this lens now. And that's what this does for you. So when you look at a person, you have this lens. So your perception is enhanced. And because your perception is enhanced, it's not hard to see what level they're at once you know the levels. Now, You know the person is at this level. If you want to help them, you get them to go up to the next level. And that is monumentally important because it is the gradient. It's the next thing. See, just like that guy, you know, he's doing 12 reps, three sets of 12 reps. He says, this is getting easy. I said, okay, let's try 15 reps. See, he says, oh, no, this is, by the time I get to 15, this is tough. Okay, just keep doing it. See, it's the next thing.
Yeah.
So I'm giving you the next thing for these 35 areas of life. And you will find, if you study this material, that I have covered human phenomena.
Now, would you say that septemics can apply to everybody?
Yes. And let me give you a caveat on that. If you can read English reasonably well and you want to improve yourself or others, this book is for you. If you can't read English, you can't read this book because it's in English. But also, if you have no interest in improving yourself or others, this book is not for you. So, there's all kinds of categories of people who are not interested in either improving themselves or improving others. This would include psychopaths, sociopaths, narcissists, the insane, serial murderers, war criminals, corrupt politicians, ignoramuses, morons, all kinds of categories of people who are not up to either self improvement or other improvement. So if you meet some guy who's a gang member, he's in some MS-13 or something,
Yeah.
he has no education, he has no benevolence, he's interested in getting your money away from you. And if you give him a hard time, he'll stab you. That's what he's about. See? So he's not going to be motivated to read this book. So look, Adolf Hitler was at level 7 on the scale of basic purposes, which is his basic purpose was to destroy.
Yeah.
This is not obvious. And I can tell you from my studies, when I figured this out, it really helped me understand World War II. Because prior to understanding that, I would look at the things he did and I'd say, why would he do that? Why would he do that? This doesn't make any sense. But after I discovered that, now it all made sense. Because he wasn't just destructive to the Allies, he was destructive to the Wehrmacht. He was destructive to his own family. He was destructive to Germany. That's how those people are. Now, fortunately, there aren't too many of them. But
Fascinated. He's a fascinating human.
yeah,
I read a book called Blitzed. I talked about it on this podcast a couple times, but just a wild phenomenon about drugs in the Third Reich, and I'm sure some of his aspirations were derailed with all the meth he was taking. But I would agree with you there. I think his inner whatever his scale would be to destroy, and that
right.
was everything, including
Yeah,
himself.
that's one scale. There's 34 other scales. You can analyze them across 34 other axes. Now,
Have you done that? Have you taken
what
historical
else?
figures and
Or just people in general?
just people in general, like
Oh
a
yeah.
historical figure?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I haven't done it with historical figures, but I have done it with actual people that I know.
Okay.
If you look in the back of the book, there's an appendix in which I go through 3 actual people that I knew very well over a long period of time, and I did a complete septemic analysis of them across 35 scales. So you can see how this works, what it's like when you analyze a person. And these people, I give no names, I don't even give a gender. I just say subject 1, subject 2, subject 3, and I give you the exact data. Okay, so it's an exemplar. So the thing about this is a person, most people are high in some scales and low in other scales. There are very few people who are high on all of the scales and low on all of the scales. Fewer than 1% of humans are at or near the top of all the scales. A larger proportion, I estimate about 4%, are at or near the bottom of all the scales. That 4% are the dregs of society. So you find a guy, he's a professional criminal, He's a drug addict. Uh, he's illiterate, and he beats up his girlfriend. That guy is at or near the bottom of most of those scales, if not all. That's
Now with the
why
one
he's like,
percent, now with the 1%, you said a lot of the 1% are at the top. Are those people very successful?
not necessarily, no. It depends
Okay.
on how you define success. Jesus is the best example of somebody who is at or near the top of all the scales. Now, he was tortured to death as an enemy of the state. You want to call that success? Many people say that's not success.
It's true.
On the other hand, now, 2,000 years later, 2.5 billion people are still following him. That
That's
sounds like
success.
success, doesn't it?
That's success. Yeah.
Well, what is your standard for success? You see?
Okay.
So, like for example, I can look at a guy and say, yeah, this guy has $1 million, but he's an ignorant fool. There was that movie in which Broderick Crawford did with Judy Holliday, uh, in which he played a rich, vulgar magnate, crude, mean, and had millions of dollars. Uh, Bill Holden was also in that movie. I think it was called Born Yesterday. He was an example of a guy. Well, he would say, "I'm successful. I have my own corporation. I drive in a limousine.
Yeah.
I smoke $5 cigars. Well, now maybe they're $20 cigars. I don't know. I don't smoke.
Inflation.
But,
Yeah, probably $5, probably $20.
but, but anyway, the point is, who's going to decide what's success or not? See, now if you are a Christian and you study the Gospels, you would say Jesus was totally successful. And if you read the Gospels with specificity carefully, it's pretty clear he knew what he was doing.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah, that's interesting. I guess that part of it, I guess, could be a little subjective. Is, well, what do you deem success? It is
that's
hard because that is that's a belief. I know we kind of started the
that's
podcast
right.
that way, right? It's a
That's not
belief.
how you use this. Let me tell
Yeah.
you how to use this. Let's say you invited me to your home to see your garden. You say, Jim, you like flowers? Come and see my garden. I don't even know if you have a garden, but if you do, you might say, Jim, come and look at my garden. So I show up at Rob's house and I see, oh, Rob has hydrangeas, irises, tulips, chrysanthemums, forget me nots. And the reason I can analyze it like this is I know a lot about flowers. I've been gardening since I was a kid.
Yeah.
And if you wanted me to, I could advise you. I could say, these should be in the shade, but these need more sun. These need a lot of water, these need less water, et cetera, et cetera. So if you bring a 5-year-old kid into that garden, he is going to see and smell the exact same thing that I saw and smelled. But all he can say is, these are pretty and they look nice and they smell nice. That's
Yeah.
all he knows. They smell nice and they're pretty. Now, most adults are like that kid as regards people. They don't know what they're looking at. They
I would
don't
agree.
know. They don't know that this guy is a hydrangea, this guy is an iris, and this guy is a begonia. They don't know that. And that is why in the United States, more than 50% of the marriages end in divorce. Obviously, they did not correctly ascertain who this was. Who is this
Yeah.
person? See?
And
So let
by
me
the
give
time they
you,
did, it was a little too late.
that's right.
Well, that's
So
interesting.
let me give you a contrast.
Yeah.
So about 6 months ago, I'm a single guy. I met this gorgeous blonde, beautiful, graceful, uh, glamorous woman. And we were very interested in one another. So now we're going through the usual preliminaries. Oh, what do you do for a living?
Yeah.
What do you like to do on the weekend? Do you like to go to movies? All that stuff, right? So we had 6 or 8 conversations along those lines. Just you show me and I'll show you yours. I'll show you
Yep.
mine. So now, as we're doing this, right, we're having these conversations. I notice, she's low on that scale. So we have another conversation. She's low on this other scale. We had another conversation. She's low on this scale too. Now the light bulb is going on over my head. Wait a minute. This is a downscale person. Even if she looks like Rita Hayworth, she's still a downscale person.
Yeah.
So I dismissed her. I said, just out of nowhere, I said, sorry, no thanks. Pass. She was shocked.
Well,
Shocked.
probably not used to it. Probably not used
That's
to it.
right. I'm probably the first guy who ever did that to her. We didn't have any argument or anything. I could just see where she was on these scales. And I know better than to get mixed up in that.
Yeah.
So, look, when I was a young man, this book didn't exist. I hadn't discovered these phenomena. So I made the same stupid mistakes that everybody else makes. Getting involved with people I shouldn't have gotten involved with. You get involved with a woman, it's a train wreck.
Yeah. Been there.
So right now, for me, that absolutely cannot happen, does not happen, will not happen, because I know what I'm dealing with. So using these scales for me, because I know them, is as difficult as drinking water.
Interesting.
So I'll see somebody like let's say I'm at the bank, right? I'm waiting in line at the bank, and I'm just watching two people over there talking. I'm spotting them on scales. This is not subtle. And I'll give you an example. I know the basic purpose of every president of the United States, going back as far as Franklin Delano Roosevelt, and many of the previous presidents who I studied, such as Washington and Jefferson and Lincoln. Now, as far as since Roosevelt, we have all this video. We have recordings. You can hear his voice. You can read his speeches. It's not hard to get. You just observe the person. That is how this is done. It's just like I go into your garden and say, oh, this is a tulip and this is a rose. Now look, every tulip in existence is unique. And every rose in existence is unique. But I can always tell the difference between a tulip and a rose, and you probably can too,
Yeah.
right? So
Absolutely.
that's how people are. Okay, this guy is a rose and this guy is a tulip. I'm not saying tulips are better than roses or roses are better than tulips. I'm just saying that's what they are.
You're stating the
So
obvious.
if you're going to pick roses, you better wear gloves because those thorns will chop you up.
Yeah.
But if you're going to pick tulips, you don't need gloves. You just come clip, put it in a vase. See? So that's good to know, isn't it?
Look, man, we hit the hour mark, but you hit me with some interesting things to think about. I'm definitely going to check your book out. Typically, whenever I have an author, someone that's been on my show that has content, I always check it out. So I'll buy your book. I'll check it out. It's on Kindle, right?
Uh, I'm not sure. I think so. It
I think I
exists as
saw it when I was on
it
Amazon,
exists
I
as
think.
hardbound, softbound, and ebook. So
Okay, all
probably
right.
it's on Kindle.
So I'll definitely check it out. Can you tell everybody where they could find your content, where they could find everything, and if you got anything going on in the near future? I don't know if you got a follow up or if you're still working on anything else.
Okay, well, I want to invite your viewers to my website, which is septemics.com, Septemics, where you can see what many readers have said about it, what many journalists have written about it, what the reviews are. You can even read sections of the book itself. And there's even a pre recorded introduction to Septemics that you could listen to that explains it to a new person in 15 minutes.
I saw that. I didn't get a chance to listen to it, so I'll definitely
Yeah.
check that out.
Yeah,
Well,
and if you go through all that, it's going to be just like what happened to you. By the time you finish all that, you're going to say, "I got to get this book." That's what happens to people. This, whoa, where have you been all my life? And I
well,
just want to say one thing in closing,
yeah.
okay, to try to sort of bring this into focus for your listeners. The data in this book are vital. for every person and can help you to achieve your goals faster and easier by explaining what might otherwise seem to be inexplicable or random.
Or mysterious. I like it. I
Mysterious
like
and
it.
inexplicable. Yeah, it's pretty much the same.
Close, right?
Yeah,
Well, look, my podcast is Drink O'Clock Pod on all socials. Drink O'Clock Podcast wherever you listen to podcasts. And look, it was a pleasure having you on. And everyone listening, check out his book. Who knows? Maybe it'll, at the end of the day, the whole reason I do this podcast is to help people, and also to get to know the people that do these things, that incredible things that we might not even know. So hopefully, someone will buy your book and it'll change their life.
yes.
Awesome. Well,
If
look,
they read the book, it will change their lives.
well, Jim, it was a pleasure having you on the podcast, buddy, and let's do this again soon.
Thanks, Rob.
Thank you.
On a stormy night where legends unfold, there's a podcast that's breaking the mold. Raise your voices, raise your glass high. Welcome to the Drink O'Clock Podcast. Let's dive. Oh, grab an old fashioned and join the fray. Raise your spirits, let the music play. From the corner pub to the dance hall floor. Drink O'Clock Podcast, we're ready for more. We're ready for more. With a mix of folklore and rebel cheer, we'll guide you through tales of whiskey and beer. From Irish shores to lands afar, grab your friends, it's time to raise the bar.